Preamble to ancient geometry. In the previous video, we discussed what body is and what surface is. Let us quickly review what we uncovered. In order to be clear about what we meant, we needed to say what we mean by body. By body, we refer to whatever has volume or bulk, whether or not it has mass or other measurable properties. We asked whether bodies exist, and we stated that it is obvious that bodies exist, that only a pathological skeptic would think otherwise. We also had a nominal definition for surface. What did we mean by surface? Surface means what first divides a body from all other bodies. We also asked whether surface exists. We proved that surface exists in the following manner. Since bodies exist, and since one's body is in fact divided from the rest of the universe, surface must exist. As we noted, imaginary knives don't divide real loaves. This argument for the existence of surface reveals to us the essential definition of a surface, as opposed to the nominal definition of a surface. In order to divide one body from another body, something must have position between the bodies. In order for this something to divide one body from every other body, it cannot itself be a body. That is, it cannot introduce a gap between the bodies. In order for this something to divide the whole body from every other body, it must surround the body, spanning all sides of it. That is, the divider must be at the extremity of a body, having parts that extend and spread continuously around the body. This then gives us a definition of the nature of a surface. That is, a surface is a continuous quantity having position and spread without having bodily bulk. Now, not all geometry textbooks treat surface in this manner. Some geometry books describe a surface as a thin skin that surrounds a body. The surface is what the skin becomes as it grows thinner. As they say, the limit as it approaches a thickness of 0. Now, there are problems with this. The limit idea may seem precise and familiar to those who have studied the calculus, but not to the beginner of mathematics. To the beginner, the notion is vague and poorly understood. Moreover, the student is left confused and skeptical. No body really contracts in this way, and if a body did vanish in this way, it would cease existing. So surface seems to be an imaginary idea at best. Finally, the idea of an outside skin presupposes that something is already dividing the skin from the inner body. This something is the very surface we were seeking to discover and define. This is why we must nominally define surface as the first divider of bodies. We then proceed from that definition to show surface has to exist, and then to uncover its essential nature. This removes the skepticism and the confusion of the student. Now let us analyze surface. Consider any surface like the one shown in the diagram. We showed that in order to divide bodies, it must have parts. Consider two parts, such as the two ends. Let us call them surface A and surface F. What separates part A from part F? Let us say another surface, E. This surface must come between them in order to divide them. What separates part A from part E? Again, we can say another surface that comes between them, surface D. And what separates part A from part D? Does this sound familiar? We have here a part C. So we get to C and then B until we get to surfaces A and B, which are right beside each other, which are divided but have no surface gap between them. Another way to look at the question is this: what divides A from all other parts of the entire surface? Clearly, what divides one part of a surface from all other parts cannot be another surface. It has got to lack the spread of a surface and the bulk of a body, so that it can come between the touching parts of the surface without imposing a gap between them. The solution to our problem is very similar to the solution to our problem of how to divide a body. Even though it might seem impossible for something to exist which has no bulkiness like a body and no spread like a surface, we know that such a thing must exist in order that surfaces be divided into parts. We call such a divider a line. In other words, our nominal definition of a line is the first divider of a surface. We have come to discover that such a thing must exist. Lines must exist because surfaces are continuous magnitudes. Since a line cannot spread out over a body, it has no width, so we cannot see it. Nevertheless, we know it is there. We can see the blue part of this surface and the yellow part of this surface. We know that between these parts there must be a line dividing them. This line is neither yellow nor blue. It can't have a color because it's not spread over the body. As a result, we cannot directly see it. Yet we see the surface it divides, and so we know it is there. It must be. We also know that this line must extend out continuously across the surface from top to bottom so that it can divide the surface at the top, the bottom, and the middle. So a line must have parts. This particular line has straight parts at top and curved parts at the bottom. A line must be a magnitude, therefore, lacking depth and width. Summarizing what we have discussed so far, we are surrounded by bulky things called bodies, which extend continuously through the space around us, and our own body, which extends through us. It is self-evident that bodies exist. Nothing can be more obvious than this. We next argued that a divider of bodies must exist. This divider must be between a body and all other bodies. It cannot be a body, yet it must have parts that spread out continuously over and around the body. And we called this divider of bodies surface, and noted that since its parts spread out continuously, it is a magnitude. But since it cannot be a body, it must lack the bulk of a body. We understand it as a magnitude without depth. We know surfaces exist because we know bodies' parts must have some divider between them, namely a magnitude that has no bodily bulk. Because a surface is a magnitude, a divider of surfaces must also exist. This divider must be between a surface and all other parts. It cannot be a surface, yet it must have parts that extend out continuously beside and around the surface. We called this divider of surfaces line, and noted that since a line's parts spread out continuously, it is a magnitude. But since it cannot be a body or surface, it must lack the bulk of a body and the spread of a surface. We understand it as a magnitude without depth or thickness. We know lines exist because we know a surface's parts must have some divider between them, namely a magnitude which has no superficial spread. Twice we have considered a magnitude and been led to conclude that it must have a divider. First, we were led from body to surface, then from surface to line. But a line is also a magnitude, and so a divider of line must exist. This divider must be between the parts of a line. It cannot be a body, or a surface, or a line. It must be lacking in all these ways. We nominally define the point then as a divider of lines, or the first divider of a line. We can see the green and red parts of this surface. We know that there is a line dividing the green and red parts. The line has parts. There is a curved part between the light and green surfaces, and a bent part between the dark red and green surfaces. But these two parts meet and are divided at an invisible point. We cannot see this point, but we know it is there. This divider is different from previous dividers, however. Other dividers needed to have parts to divide, but the line has nothing but length, so its divider must lack everything but its position. We can define a point then as that principle of magnitude which has no parts, but only position. We know points exist because we know a line's parts must have some divider between them, namely something with no linear extension. Do we need to continue? Do we need to go on? Are we falling into infinite regress? Do we need to find a divider of points? If we did keep going on, we would end up with an infinite regress problem, but there is no reason to go on because a point has no parts. It cannot be divided. It is amazing to think that something can exist when it has absolutely no parts. And because it has no parts, it cannot have color, temperature, texture, or shape. All one can say is to point at it and say it's there. Once we have understood what a point is and seen that it must exist, we're now in a position to start geometry. Here we have something that is both certain, true, and absolutely simple. So, to review, have you understood? Where does analysis start and where does it go? Where does synthesis start and where does it go? What does body mean and how can we know that it exists? What does surface mean and how can we know that surface exists? What does line mean and how do we know that lines exist? What does point mean and how do we know that points exist? How do we know that there are not more dividers beyond the point? Suppose, for example, that I defined a smidgen as the divider of a point. That's the nominal definition. But then, how did we prove that such a thing cannot exist? This concludes our analysis of body down to a point. Please click on the link to proceed to the next video.